Are the Montreal Canadiens about to make a move that could define their entire season? Or are they trapped in a nightmare scenario where every potential solution comes with an impossible price tag? The tension is palpable in Montreal right now. The air around the Bell Center feels thick with anticipation, frustration, and that gnawing sense of urgency that only comes when a team realizes they're running out of time to fix critical problems. The Canadiens aren't just dealing with ordinary roster challenges. They're navigating a perfect storm of injuries, limited options, and a trade market that's become more expensive than a penthouse in downtown Montreal. Let's be brutally honest here. When one of the most respected insiders in hockey starts talking about your team scouring the league for help, that's not just casual window shopping. That's desperation dressed up in professional language. Darren Dreger dropped a bombshell on TSN Insider Trading that should have every Habs fan simultaneously nodding in understanding and screaming in frustration. The veteran insider painted a picture that's become all too familiar in today's NHL, a market where demand vastly outweighs supply. And a few teams willing to sell are charging premium prices that would make your wallet weep. I look at the Montreal Canadiens, Dreger revealed, his words carrying the weight of insider knowledge. They are one of those teams that are scouring the league. They're looking for the right fit up front. It doesn't necessarily have to be a center. We know Kent Hughes covets a number one center, but he's just looking for help up front. The problem is there are so few sellers and the prices are high. Think about that for a moment. Kent Hughes, the architect of Montreal's rebuild, the man who's been methodical and patient in his approach, is actively hunting for solutions. This isn't a GM casually exploring options during a quiet Tuesday afternoon. This is a calculated, urgent search for reinforcements that could make or break the Canadiens' trajectory this season. The injury situation has forced Hughes' hand. When you're dealing with a depleted forward group, every game becomes a test of depth, resilience, and creative lineup management. But there's only so much shuffling you can do before the music stops, and you realize you're one chair short of having a functional roster. Enter Philip Tomasino, a name that should intrigue Canadiens fans for multiple reasons. The Pittsburgh Penguins placed a young forward on waivers, making him available to any team willing to claim him. Here's a player selected 24th overall in 2019. First-round pedigree that suggests legitimate NHL talent suddenly available for the cost of absolutely nothing except his existing contract. Tomasino represents exactly the kind of calculated risk that could pay dividends for a team like Montreal. He's young enough to fit the rebuild timeline, talented enough to contribute immediately, and available through a mechanism that doesn't require surrendering precious draft picks or prospects. In a market where prices are inflated and sellers are scarce, the waiver wire becomes an oasis in the desert. But here's where the story gets interesting, and frankly, a bit frustrating for Habs fans. John Beecher, a left-handed center who also hit waivers, was claimed by the Calgary Flames on Tuesday afternoon. The Flames, sitting at the front of the waiver priority list, had first dibs. Even if the Canadiens were salivating over Beecher's potential fit, they were powerless to act. The waiver priority system, determined by standings, meant Montreal was stuck watching another team grab a player who could have helped solve their center depth issues. This is the reality of being a team in transition. You don't always get first choice. You don't always have the luxury of selecting from the full menu of available options. Sometimes you're relegated to hoping the teams ahead of you pass on players you desperately need. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, or should I say, the future Hall of Famer in the rumor mill, Steven Stamkos, the legendary sniper who's terrorized goaltenders for over a decade, has been linked to the Canadiens in recent trade speculation. The Nashville Predators forward is apparently in the conversation when it comes to potential Montreal targets. Imagine that for a second. Steven Stamkos in a Canadiens jersey. The same Stamkos who scored over 500 career goals, who's won 2 Stanley Cups, who represents everything a contending team wants in a veteran presence. It would be the kind of blockbuster move that sends shockwaves through the entire league and has fans lining up around the block for tickets. But here's where smart management separates itself from emotional decision-making. While Stamkos would undoubtedly be fun to watch in Montreal, there's a better target wearing the same Nashville jersey, Ryan O'Reilly. O'Reilly represents a more logical fit for what the Canadiens actually need. He's a legitimate number one center, Exactly what Kent Hughes covets. He's a two-way force who can dominate face-offs, kill penalties, and provide the kind of veteran leadership that young teams desperately need. He's won a Stanley Cup as a playoff MVP. He's the type of player who makes everyone around him better, who elevates line mates through his work ethic and hockey IQ. More importantly, O'Reilly fits the timeline better. While Stamkos is still productive, O'Reilly's game is built on elements that age more gracefully: defensive responsibility, face-off prowess, the ability to play in all situations. These are skills that don't necessarily decline as rapidly as pure goal-scoring ability. The question becomes, does Nashville want to move either player? And more critically, what would the asking price be? If the Predators are willing to deal, they're going to extract maximum value. And that could mean parting with assets that Hughes has carefully accumulated during the rebuild. Amidst all the trade talk and injury concerns, there's been a beacon of hope skating on the Canadiens' blue line. Lane Hutson, the rookie defenseman who's been turning heads all season, delivered what might have been his best statistical performance of the year against the Columbus Blue Jackets. And that's saying something, because Hutson has had plenty of decent games this season. But this performance transcended decent. This was a showcase of everything that makes Hutson special. His skating, his vision, his ability to create offense in the back end. For a team desperately searching for bright spots, Hutson's continued development represents exactly the kind of positive trajectory that makes rebuilds worthwhile. The beauty of Hutson's emergence is that it's happening organically, without the pressure of unrealistic expectations. He's a young player figuring out the NHL game, making mistakes, learning from them, and steadily improving. In a season where so much feels uncertain, Hutson's growth provides a foundation of optimism. In a move that speaks to roster management and asset development, the Canadiens returned defenseman Mark Delgado to the Laval Rocket. The timing makes perfect sense from a playing time perspective. Montreal doesn't play until Thursday, while Laval faces a Syracuse crunch on Wednesday night at Place Bell. This is a kind of organizational depth management that doesn't make headlines but matters enormously for player development. Delgado needs ice time. He needs to continue developing his game in situations where he can play meaningful minutes. Sitting in an NHL press box doesn't serve that purpose. Getting regular shifts in the AHL does. It's these small decisions, these calculated moves that prioritize long-term development over short-term roster convenience, that separate well-run organizations from those that perpetually struggle. Kent Hughes and his management team understand that building a sustainable winner requires patience and strategic thinking at every level of the organization. So, where does this leave the Montreal Canadiens as we approach the midpoint of November? They're a team at crossroads, facing decisions that will shape not just the season, but potentially the next several years of franchise. The injury situation has accelerated the timeline for potential moves. What might have been a patient, methodical search for the right addition has become more urgent. The trade market conditions, few sellers, high prices, complicate matters significantly. Hughes can't simply snap his fingers and acquire the help his team needs. He has to navigate a complex landscape where every decision carries significant consequences. The waiver wire offers occasional opportunities, but those come with their own limitations and uncertainties. The big-name trade targets like Stamkos and O'Reilly are intriguing, but acquiring them would require surrendering assets that Hughes has carefully accumulated. Meanwhile, the development of players like Hutson continues to provide hope and validation for the rebuild process. These young players represent the foundation of something potentially special, but they need support. They need complementary pieces. They need the right environment to maximize their potential. The next few weeks will be fascinating to watch. Will Hughes pull the trigger on a significant trade, or will he continue his patient approach, trusting that the current roster can weather the injury storm? Will another useful player hit waivers, giving Montreal a chance to add depth without sacrificing assets? Will the trade market conditions shift as more teams fall out of playoff contention and become sellers? These are the questions that will define Montreal's season. These are the decisions that will determine whether this year becomes a step forward in the rebuild or a frustrating reminder that patience and timing are everything in professional sports. One thing is certain: Kent Hughes isn't sitting idle. He's working the phones, exploring options, performing due diligence. He's doing exactly what a competent general manager should do when faced with adversity. The question isn't whether he's trying to improve the team. The question is whether the right opportunity will present itself at a price that makes sense for Montreal's long-term vision. This is the reality of being a Canadiens fan right now. It's exciting. It's frustrating. It's filled with possibility and uncertainty in equal measure. So, here's what I want to know. What move would you make if you were Ken Hughes? Would you go all in on a player like O'Reilly, or would you stay patient and trust the rebuild process? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to smash that like button if you want more in-depth coverage of everything happening with the Habs. Thanks for watching.